Hi, Jeremy here, Modern Vitality. In today's video, we're taking a look at stress and trauma. It's very, very important that we have clarity on the difference and distinctions between these two things. Because so many people, especially when you have complex chronic health condition, you have this like neurological overwhelm, right? Where you're almost kind of at a low threshold where little things can kind of trigger you or set you off, little stressors, and it's just going to be on your mind for the next week, or you'll have trouble sleeping, or you could have symptom flares coming from stress. I'm here to tell you actually that stress is a good thing. Stress is a gift. What we have to be aware of is trauma, and we have to be able to keep the two separate and distinct so that we know when we're in a position to handle stress or if we have such a low threshold and why that is, so that we can then start to heal and then increase our threshold so that we can then handle more stress, because stress makes us grow. Ultimately, we're resilient creatures, and stress will make us grow if we have the right conditions. So I'm going to break down in this video the difference between stress and trauma, and being confused on this will absolutely hold you back from healing. I mean it. You've got to understand this, because once you've healed or you're in a process where you've gotten a lot of your life back, you need to be able to also grow as a person, and it's going to take stress to do that. So we've got to get you to a place where the stress won't break you, right? Where it helps you grow. How to turn stress from something that destroys you into actual fuel for growth. We can do that in this video. I'm going to show you how. All right, let's get started. In my experience, it's super important to be able to differentiate stress versus trauma. Stress helps you grow, trauma can break you, trauma can freeze you. And I see this coming up a lot in our group. We have a chat group, Modern Vitality Solutions and Support. It's free to join as a guest. You can ask me anything in there. There's lovely people from all around the world. And one of the things I've noticed, people who are in the group, people who are going through my programs, people who are just coming in, there can be a difficulty between understanding the difference between good, healthy stress that helps you grow and trauma, right? When is something too much? How can we tell? Because stress, if you don't have a good stress response, then anything's going to set you off. Anything. So when you're trying to heal, right, and you got neurological overwhelm and you're thinking, well, I don't want to stress myself. I'm trying to remove stress, right? Jeremy, why are you saying stress is good? It's good contextually, in the right context. And once you understand the difference, as I'm going to show you, I'm going to draw you some great little graphs here. Once you understand the difference, you'll be able to know where you are in your healing path and what you can take. That way you don't break yourself on accident. Okay, it's really important. If you've been around my work at all, you probably heard me explaining stage 1, immune system, stage 2, digestive, stage 3, neuroadrenal, stage 4, blood circulation, stage 5 is kind of a bonus. It's where we do boosting and hormesis and more biohacking stuff kind of lives in it. That's where you're already feeling basically normal and you're getting back to yourself, and now you want to start thriving and kind of testing yourself. So this really comes in when people are moving through this process and they get to like stage 3, neuroadrenal, right? Old stressors and how we handle our stress response and cortisol metabolism and all these things, it starts to become more important then. But also stage 5, when we're back on our feet and we're making plans and having fun and being spontaneous and taking care of other people and traveling and dancing and whatever else we're up to, right? Getting back to work. And then we want to test ourselves, we want to grow. So what I'm going to share with you is one way to look at this so you can understand. I want you to never be confused between stress and trauma, because if you muddy this up, you can set yourself back severely. Right? But if you have clarity on this, you can use this understanding to get stronger faster. And that means healing. So I'm going to get my magic marker out here. So we have stress, right? Here's a little graph, and here's your threshold, right? Anything above that threshold will damage you. Okay? So what we have is you have your baseline of where you're at, and then you give yourself a little stressor that gets close to your threshold, right? And then your body metabolizes that. And then what happens is you get a bigger threshold over time. So what does this look like? I'm going to use the weightlifting example because everybody's familiar conceptually with this. Even if you don't lift weights, you understand probably how this works. If I go pick up a kettlebell, right, and I just lift it up and down, and I'm giving my biceps stress, right? I'm stressing my arm. And in that process, what I'm doing is I'm giving it some damage, right? I'm giving it a little bit of a challenge, but I'm not going too far. And then I give it some time to rest and heal. And what happens over time is that because I did that, now next time I go to lift up that same weight, it's going to be a little easier for me, right? It's going to be more work to get me to that threshold, right? So I'm going to have to increase the weight, or I'm going to have to do more repetitions or something like that. I'm getting a wider margin between where I am and how much I can take, right? So the next time I go to the gym, it's going to take me longer, right? See, because originally it's like this much, but that wouldn't get me close to my stress threshold. Right? So over time, we get this nice margin. Now we have this increased capacity for what we can take, right? Meaning our baseline default state is getting further and further away from the threshold where we break, right? This is strength. This is resilience. This is how stress makes you stronger. It's a gift. You want this in your life, but it's got to be the right dosage, right? And it's got to be the right time. You don't want to start doing this when you're in stage 1 or stage 2. Sometimes you don't want to do this in stage 3. It's just how it is. You got to understand your body as you're going through the stages, and you're going through a healing process that's mapped out. Instead of just doing silver bullet shotgun approach, just throw all the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, right? I get it. Shots in the dark, I used to guess too as a clinician. I know both sides of this. So better to have a plan, an organized plan. And when you're following that plan, you can know, okay, it's about time now to start adding stress, right? Intentionally in small doses to make myself stronger. But if you rush that, if you do that too early, if you skip stages, it'll set you back. And I'll show you why right here, because we have trauma, right? So trauma is when we have the same kind of deal. We've got our threshold here. This will break you, right? And you've got your baseline, you're here. And you do something, right? Or something happens to you and it pops through your threshold. Now, I'm going to leave that right there. We'll come back to this line. But the equivalent here for weightlifting would be, I lift up a weight that's way too heavy and my biceps tendon just tears. And now I've injured myself, right? I went past my threshold. This isn't good. Okay, because with stress, if I had had less of it, then I'm going to go home and rest and integrate that and have what's called a refractory period where I'm kind of healing and resting up and basically integrating that challenging input, right? And now I'm going to come out stronger on the other side. With trauma, you're so frazzled because this thing just broke you in a oftentimes a new way, and your body and your brain don't know how to reintegrate. So whether it was a physical trauma, right, like a car accident or an actual injury or something like that, or being attacked or assaulted, and then there's also the emotional part, right, which could come with any of those physical things, or sometimes it's just a straight up emotional trauma, right? You can have an emotional threshold that's now broken. And what happens with these is instead of working like stress, and this can go a couple ways, right? Because some people never reintegrate the trauma. They're just traumatized, right? Or they just kind of live right around this line. Nightmares, just they call it a 1,000-yard stare, where your brain's just trying to integrate what the hell just happened, right? Even if it was 10 years ago. It just is so far out of the norm, right? Out of the ordinary that you can't make sense of it. So if all goes well, right, then you'll be able to integrate whatever trauma, like the bicep tendon will heal, right? You get surgery or whatever you got to do, it will heal, right? If you had an emotional trauma, you get the right kind of therapy, you're doing the right things, right? And it does start to heal. But what happens is then you get when you come back on the other side of the line, your default baseline isn't going to be as low, right? You're going to be higher. You see? So now it takes less to set you off. With stress, we're getting stronger each time. It takes more to break me. It takes more to break me, right? If you get traumatized, now it can take less, right? And it depends how well you integrate this, because some people can integrate trauma and it actually makes them stronger, and they're hanging out down here, right? It's totally possible. Absolutely. And in other cases, what happens is you wind up hanging out here and you're kind of in limbo because you haven't quite integrated it yet to where you've got that space. And this is where most people are. They're hovering in this kind of pattern, at least when they come into my world. And this is why we get kind of neurologically triggered and set off so easy, because over here, a stressor this big, right? My 2-year-old screaming, something like that, right? It's fine. It doesn't break me. But when I don't have that much margin to begin with, you see, it's the same distance, it's the same amount of stress, but now it's basically traumatic. Things that normal people, oh, the 2-year-old screaming, yeah, I don't want to listen to it either. But for you, if you're neurologically overwhelmed, meaning you're hovering around very close to your line of breaking, anyway, that little stressor will put you over and you got to go lay down for a few hours. You got to have earplugs and sensory deprivation, just to let your nervous system calm down, right? So that's what's happening in the trauma state, or somebody who's had this line kind of broken. You just don't have as wide of a margin. Now, ultimately, we want to start healing, right? Which is part of my job, is to present this framework and take people through a path and a process where we can start to expand this space again, right? Because look at this person here, right? It would take this much to get him close to breaking. Can you imagine what that would do to somebody in this situation, right? Or here's another thing that happens too, is that sometimes you'll just get one thing after the next, right? So and this happens, things happen in threes or whatever. It's just like bad news, bad news, bad news. It's like the worst week of your life. Somebody died, you're house has mold in it, you lost your job, your dog's sick, like just bad, bad, bad. And it's just stress, stress, stress. And we can handle one thing maybe, but even if they're not that high amplitude, there's still enough of them that you don't get the, over here by the stress, you don't get that refractory period, right? So how that would look, I'm just going to draw right over this, but how that would look, this would be bad stress, right? It looks like this. You've got a stressor happens, and then before you can really metabolize it, you're like, here comes another one. Uh-oh, that stress just became a trauma, right? And before you can metabolize that all the way, here's another one, here's another one, here's another one, and then you're over here and back in this kind of space again, neurologically overwhelmed. So it's very good to understand this and to have clarity on where you are, because little stressors, right? If you have enough space here between your baseline and where you're going to break at your threshold, little stressors will make you stronger. It's actually good to hear your 2-year-old screaming, right? Because it'll help you develop more patience. You become seasoned, The first kid, it's just killing me, all this stuff. By the time you've had the second kid, it's a whole different deal. You're used to it, right? You've become stronger. You've got a deeper bank of reserves to draw on. That's like a healthy, normal situation. We should be getting more resilient over time, right? Which actually leads itself into anti-fragility, right? Which is a whole other concept, which blew my mind once I was exposed to that. So that's not for this video, but basically there's the differentiation. You got to know this, you got to understand it, you got to know where you are, because if you're hanging out in this zone, then don't be surprised if every little thing kind of sets you off. And that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with all the other people, right? Not at all. That's just, you need to identify the situation. You got to go, well, this is where I'm at, right? Of course. Just like if you lived in the desert, you wouldn't be upset that it's hot out during the day, right? That's just part of the landscape, right? If you're here, you can't beat yourself up about basically being triggered about every little thing, right? Why am I so fragile? I feel like I'm just getting set off all the time. Well, stop the negative self-talk, right? Don't blame yourself about it. Just identify where you are, get oriented to that, and then we move from there. And then we find ways, very small ways, right, to give yourself a little bit of stress and start to get this. Now we're getting healthier here, right? Start to get this thing back to where you've got some kind of space again, right? Like this, to where you feel like you can breathe. This can be done, by the way. So I've been fortunate enough to help people on this journey, and I've seen it happen plenty. So this can totally be done. What happens when this is done, by the way? Because it's not just about you and your stress trigger and your threshold, because if you're one part of a greater group, like a family, right, then that affects everybody else. What's really interesting is when you go from here to here, your entire relationship changes, all the dynamics. So now you have better quality time with your kids, right? Your spouse, partner, all this, that you're more present. You're not trying to escape them for self-preservation so often. I mean, that's what it's all about at the end of the day, right? Is being with people you love and not feeling like it's an existential threat. So we need to get to this space. So anybody with a complex chronic health condition, right? Lyme disease, fibromyalgia, mold exposure, chronic fatigue syndrome, long haulers, candida, reactivated Epstein-Barr. There's a ton of these things, right? Anything autoimmune. If you're in this situation and you're working on overcoming that, getting your health back, you don't have to do this alone, right? Don't struggle by yourself. We've got a great group. I mentioned it earlier. It's a wonderful group. It's free to join as a guest. I keep it very cozy. It's a cultivated environment. We've got a vault full of videos like this that'll help you, that are interactive, that'll help you figure out exactly what's going on with you. I do have programs I take people through. But I mean, even as a guest, as a free guest, you can learn a lot. You can come in there, you can ask me anything. You can rub shoulders with some of the other folks. People are from all over the planet in there. We've got people from Europe, North America, Australia, all different continents coming in. Lovely, lovely, positive human beings. Everybody, no complaining, no whining, no misery. Everybody's very proactive, very sophisticated, very bright about healing. And these are all people who want to be empowered. Right? These are all people who want to do this stuff and learn how to get to a place where they can start to stress themselves a little bit and grow and grow and grow and get their lives back. So if that appeals to you, I would encourage you to find the link for your application, fill it out, don't hold back, right? This is my opportunity to get to know you. I do read every single one. And if your application looks really, really good, like you'd be a great fit for our group, I'll get you in as soon as I can. It might be a little bit of a wait. I do keep the group cozy, as I mentioned. Sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's 2 months. I try not to make people wait much longer than that. I'm really doing my best. So you'll hear from me. Keep an eye on your inbox for a response just as soon as I can. In the meantime, you might consider liking this video, subscribe to the channel, do all that normal kind of YouTube stuff so you can train the algorithm to show you things that matter, that are going to help you get your life back, instead of just mindless algorithm scroll feed material, right? Take charge, take that algorithm and tell it what's important to you. All right, I hope this helps you. Let's get you feeling better. Cheers.